When you stand alone, without allies, without protection, without a single soul to guard your interests, most people break. But the few who rise understand a darker truth. Solitude is not a disadvantage, it's a weapon. Today, we confront the problem that destroys the weak. How to dominate when you have no one to rely on but your own ruthless will. In every age, the solitary figure is feared more than the man with armies. An ally can betray, a friend can falter, but a mind sharpened by isolation becomes immune to the contagion of dependence. The world watches the lone individual with curiosity and unease, for he answers to no one. Tonight, we descend into the psychology of power, authored not by kings or courts, but by those who survived without a single ally. Here, in the shadows where loyalties fade and motives rot, we explore the tactics that allow the isolated individual to bend the world without ever begging for support. If you have ever felt alone, cornered, or abandoned, understand this. Solitude is the crucible where true dominance is forged. Strength born from isolation is the first discipline of those who rise without allies. You may not realize it yet, but every time you detach from the emotional noise of others, you reclaim territory within yourself. Territory that no one can invade, distort, or poison. Consider the princes who fell not from weakness in battle, but from their dependence on the approval of those around them. A ruler who needs affection is already conquered. And what of you? Do you seek validation from people who offer nothing but distraction? Or have you begun to sense the quiet power that comes from wanting nothing from anyone? Detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It is the art of seeing human nature without the filters of desire, fear, or longing. Most individuals cannot do this. They cling to relationships like a drowning man clings to debris, terrified that solitude might reveal how little control they truly possess. History offers many warnings. Think of the Roman emperor who trusted his closest circle, only to be murdered by the hands he believed loyal. Trust blinded him to ambition. Attachment blinded him to betrayal. You, however, cannot afford such blindness. When you walk alone, every alliance becomes optional. Every emotion becomes a choice, and no betrayal can strike you at the heart because you have removed your heart from the battlefield. Psychology tells us that humans are wired for connection. Yet it also tells us that the moment you depend on another for emotional stability, you surrender leverage. The one who controls your mood controls your mind, and the one who controls your mind controls your moves. So ask yourself, who holds that power over you right now? Perhaps it is a friend you rely on for reassurance. Perhaps a rival whose opinion still stings. Perhaps someone who pretends to support you while secretly enjoying your weakness. Detachment severs these invisible chains. It forces you to stand on ground that cannot be shaken by someone else's mood or motives. When you master detachment, your presence changes. People sense it. They cannot read you as easily. They cannot guilt you, lure you, or pressure you with the usual emotional traps. You become the person who does not flinch, who does not beg, who does not crumble. And in a world built on manipulation, the one who is no longer manipulable becomes a threat. But understand this, detachment is not isolation for the sake of loneliness. It is strategic independence. It means you can walk away from anyone, and therefore no one can push you from your path. It means you observe motives without becoming entangled in them. You listen, but you are not swayed. You care, but you do not cling. You respond, but you do not react. Even in simple interactions, detachment grants dominance. When someone tries to provoke you, your calm unsettles them. When someone attempts to impress you, your indifference exposes their insecurity. When someone hides their intentions, your neutrality forces them to reveal more than they intended. Emotional independence becomes your armor, and in many cases, your weapon. Think of negotiation. The person who needs nothing always wins. The one who fears losing the deal will always fold first. When you detach from outcomes, You become immune to threats, bribery, and flattery. You see the field as it is, not as you wish it to be. This alone separates the strategist from the victim. But there is a deeper layer. Once you detach from the need for allies, you begin to see alliances for what they truly are, temporary instruments, not sacred bonds. And with that realization, you stop offering loyalty to those who have not earned it. You stop chasing relationships that weaken you. You stop apologizing for choosing yourself. Detachment does not make you heartless, it makes you sovereign. And sovereignty is the beginning of domination. Yet, there is a danger hidden inside this strength, a shadow waiting in the next step, a trap most solitary rulers fall into without ever realizing it. Only then will your independence evolve into mastery, rather than collapse into the arrogance that destroys the unprepared. Unpredictability is the silent weapon of the solitary strategist. When you have no allies, when no one stands behind you, the world expects you to act as they always do, predictable, cautious, controllable. But what if you refuse to meet those expectations? What if every move you make becomes a question in the minds of others? A shadow that cannot be traced, a threat they cannot measure. History is littered with rulers and generals who fell not because they lacked power, but because they became legible. Caesar marched across the Rubicon, and yet his brilliance was partly in the unpredictability of his audacity. His enemies never saw the precise moment he would strike. They could anticipate logic, but he acted with instinct, with cunning, with a mind untethered by routine. Ask yourself, do your actions follow a predictable pattern, or do they unsettle the eyes that watch you? Consider the spies, the mercenaries, the political manipulators who survive on chaos. They know the secret. Uncertainty is control. When others cannot anticipate you, they hesitate. And hesitation is a weakness they cannot afford. Every delay, every pause, every flicker of indecision you project into their calculations is a gain for you. You do not need armies, you need mystery. But let us not confuse randomness with strategy. A true master of unpredictability does not act recklessly. He calculates the consequences of seeming chaos. He understands that each unanticipated move must serve a purpose, must bend others to his design without revealing the blueprint. Even the appearance of spontaneity is a weapon, for the mind that tries to read it becomes prey to the mind that designed it. Do you recall the tale of the Byzantine court, where emperors were deposed not by the sword, but by the subtle misdirection of their advisors? A single unguarded moment, a misread signal, an unexpected gesture enough to unseat kings. Their demise was not sudden. It was the accumulation of unpredictability wielded by those who understood human expectation better than their victims. You must ask yourself, who watches your every move, and how can you make them miscalculate? Psychology teaches that humans crave patterns. We are driven to predict, to plan, to anticipate. This is why markets crash when behavior becomes erratic, why armies falter when generals are mercurial, why alliances collapse when one member refuses the expected role. When you become unpredictable, you weaponize this instinct. You force others to expend mental energy on shadows and whispers, leaving them exhausted, vulnerable, and dependent on your next move. Unpredictability also shields you from manipulation. The one who can foresee your actions can exploit your fears, desires, and expectations. But if you refuse to be foreseeable, who can strike? Who can turn your weaknesses against you when they cannot locate them? Imagine the advantage of walking into a room and letting every observer wonder, what is he planning? What will he do next? Their hesitation is your dominion. And yet, unpredictability carries its own risk. Too much chaos, and you are mistaken for incompetence. Too little, and you are legible, a book opened for anyone to read. The key is balance, calculated disarray, deliberate misdirection, a choreography of controlled uncertainty. You become both shadow and storm, presence and enigma, moving through the world with intent that cannot be measured by others. Look to the masters of intrigue in every era. Machiavellian courtiers, revolutionary leaders, CEOs who rise without allies. What binds their success is not loyalty. It is the terror of not knowing them. They are fluid, adaptive, and mercilessly strategic. They understand that in the absence of allies, the mind itself becomes your army, and unpredictability its sharpest blade. Ask yourself now, when someone watches you, do they see a map or do they see a maze? Do they predict your steps or do they stumble in the fog you create? Are you the known or the unknowable? There is a deeper layer hidden in this power, a subtle art that transforms unpredictability into dominance. It is not enough to confuse, to unsettle, to disrupt. The final mastery lies in directing that confusion toward a specific end, a goal only you fully comprehend. Only then does chaos serve strategy, and only then does uncertainty become control. And this is where the next lesson awaits, the lesson of turning solitude into authority, of making your independence visible and feared. But before you grasp that, ask yourself, are you ready to become the unknown that shapes the world around you? Authority is not granted. It is assumed, projected, and feared. When you walk alone, when you have no allies to bolster your image, the world will underestimate you. That is your advantage. But it is also your challenge. To transform solitude into visible authority, to make the absence of support appear as power, not weakness. Do you see the opportunity before you, or are you still counting the friends you lack? History is filled with figures who commanded respect without armies at their backs. Consider Alexander the Great in his earliest campaigns. He often marched ahead of his companions, his presence alone inspiring obedience and awe. His soldiers did not follow him because they were paid or because alliances demanded it. They followed because he radiated authority. You, too, must cultivate that presence. Authority is felt before it is recognized, and it begins with the mastery of self. What does this mean in practical terms? First, it means your actions must be deliberate. Every gesture, every word, every decision should communicate competence and confidence. Hesitation betrays weakness. Indecision invites scrutiny. And scrutiny, in the absence of allies, can destroy you. The powerful understand that authority is a performance as much as it is a fact. It is the perception of mastery, the aura of inevitability that surrounds a person who knows no one else is needed. Look to the courts of Renaissance Italy, where princes relied on appearances as much as armies. A ruler who could project authority with mere posture, a sharp glance, or a calculated silence often secured more obedience than one who wielded swords and gold. Why? Because humans are conditioned to follow certainty. When a man does not doubt himself, others rarely doubt him. When you stand alone, the world tests you. Your composure becomes your weapon, your independence the forge of your power. Authority also thrives on restraint. Speak less than necessary. Act more than you announce. The one who over-explains reveals insecurity. The one who overperforms invites sabotage. Observe the historical figure of Julius Caesar in Gaul. His campaigns were legendary not only for conquest, but for the subtle, controlled projection of power. He did not boast of every strategy. He allowed his victories to speak. The world interpreted his presence as authority, long before the triumphs themselves confirmed it. Are you allowing your presence to communicate your strength? Or are you announcing it to those who cannot comprehend it? Psychology reinforces this principle. Humans instinctively follow those who exude certainty and competence, often over those with stronger alliances or superior resources. Authority is contagious. It spreads like a signal through a group, compelling obedience without coercion. When you walk alone, you must amplify this effect. Make your solitude visible, not pitiful. Carry yourself as one whose judgment cannot be questioned, whose independence is your shield, and whose vision cannot be obstructed. And yet, there is a delicate balance. Authority without strategy is arrogance. Independence without projection is invisibility. The goal is to make your power undeniable, even when unseen. Let others wonder at the force behind your calm. Let your absence from the crowd speak louder than the presence of the masses. In this way, solitude becomes your instrument, and independence becomes your signature. Consider the lessons of Napoleon Bonaparte, who often operated far from home with limited support. His ability to radiate authority through precision, audacity, and the disciplined management of perception allowed him to dominate generals with larger armies. Authority is not a product of numbers. It is a function of presence, poise, and the deliberate cultivation of fear and respect. Ask yourself now, when you enter a room, do others feel your absence as much as your presence? Do they hesitate because they sense control, or do they presume weakness because you have no visible allies? True authority is both seen and felt, and it is this mastery you must claim before the world forces you to fight blindly. And there is more. Authority is only the beginning. Once it is established, it must be reinforced through strategy, manipulation, and the careful orchestration of influence. The next keynote will reveal how to transform visible authority into unassailable control, how to bend the perception of others so completely that your dominance becomes inevitable. Are you ready to learn the secret of becoming the solitary ruler whose independence is feared as much as it is respected? The path ahead is treacherous, but for those who master it, power becomes a reflection of the mind, not the support of allies. Manipulation is the tool of the solitary strategist. When you have no allies to enforce your will, influence becomes your army. Every person you encounter is a chess piece, every conversation a battlefield. Do you wield these tools, or do you stumble through interactions, hoping luck will align with your ambition? Consider the political masterminds of Renaissance courts. They commanded loyalty without armies, shaped outcomes without force, and toppled rivals without a single sword drawn. Their weapons were subtle, words carefully placed, favors extended and withdrawn, fears uncovered and exploited. Do you see how power flows to those who understand the desires and weaknesses of others? Psychology provides the key. Humans are predictably irrational. We seek approval, fear, exclusion, crave status. These impulses can be bent to your will if you understand them. The one who masters manipulation does not rely on brute strength or the number of allies. He relies on insight, the ability to read motives hidden beneath polite words and public gestures. Have you trained yourself to see what others hide, to discern the subtle patterns of ambition and fear that drive every action? Take the example of Cleopatra, a ruler who operated in a court teeming with betrayal and competing interests. She had no army strong enough to guarantee her rule at all times. Instead, she used charm, timing, and precise displays of power to manipulate both allies and enemies. Antony and Caesar were swayed not just by her presence, but by her ability to exploit their desires, to make them act according to her design. Influence, in her hands, became more potent than any legion. To manipulate effectively, you must first understand the map of desire. What does each person want? Status, wealth, security, approval? And how far are they willing to go to achieve it? The answers reveal vulnerabilities you can exploit. But beware, manipulation is not cruelty for its own sake. It is the strategic placement of pressure, the careful orchestration of incentives and fears, the creation of a reality in which others act as you intend, without realizing they have been guided. History offers lessons in subtlety. Consider the Venetian merchants of the 16th century. Alone in a sea of rivals, they survived and thrived, not through force, but through networks of influence, careful observation, and the strategic dissemination of information. They made their absence felt, their presence decisive, and their decisions impossible to predict. You must ask yourself, are your moves calculated, or do you act as others expect, leaving yourself exposed? Manipulation also requires patience. The impulsive hand spoils the plan. The clever strategist waits for the perfect moment, nudging people like pieces on a board, letting them move toward your desired outcome almost of their own accord. Have you learned to wait, to observe, to calculate? Or do you rush to control, leaving your intentions obvious, your power compromised? Even small interactions become opportunities. A compliment, a well-timed silence, a gesture of approval or disapproval, these are instruments of control. In the absence of allies, they are amplified. Every action, every word, every glance carries weight. Are you conscious of this force, or do you waste it on inconsequence? But manipulation carries danger. Overreach exposes the strategist. Misread a motive, misjudge a fear, and the piece you try to move may turn against you. This is why mastery requires both cold calculation and an understanding of human psychology deeper than the average observer dares to pursue. You must cultivate intuition, sharpened by observation, patience honed by experience, and a mind unclouded by emotion. Ask yourself now, do you guide events around you, or are you guided by the unseen currents of others' desires? Do you create your own outcomes, or do you wait for fortune to decide? The difference between domination and survival lies in this capacity to influence, to bend others' actions to your will, without allies to support you. And yet, there is a final refinement to this art, a way to transform influence into unquestionable power. It is the subject of the next segment, where your control over minds evolves into control over the world around you, and your solitary presence becomes a force that shapes reality itself. Are you ready to learn how manipulation, when perfected, becomes domination? The next step is where power ceases to be borrowed and becomes inherent. Power is often enforced with subtle cruelty. Not the chaos of rage, not the empty violence of impulse, but precise, calculated pressure applied exactly where it will fracture resistance without exhausting your own resources. When you stand alone, without allies to shield or support you, mastery over others becomes your safeguard. Do you understand the elegance of controlled cruelty? Or do you shy from the uncomfortable truth that power is sometimes cruel by design? History teaches us that the hand that hesitates is crushed, and the hand that strikes indiscriminately breeds enemies. The rulers who lasted were those who wielded cruelty as scalpel, not sledgehammer. Consider Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. He did not slaughter indiscriminately, nor did he act from anger. He used punishment as an instrument, precise, visible, and purposeful. A senator removed here, a rebellious governor replaced there. Each act reinforced his authority without inviting widespread rebellion. The lesson is clear. Cruelty must be measured, strategic, and intentional. Controlled cruelty is not about malice. It is about signaling. It is about creating a boundary that cannot be crossed without consequence. Have you ever observed how a leader's subtle reprimand or calculated exposure of disloyalty shifts the behavior of all around him? One public display, one strategic act of firmness can silence murmurs, bend ambition, and ensure compliance without mobilizing opposition. You, alone in a world of rivals, must grasp this principle. Your strength is magnified not by allies, but by your ability to instill disciplined fear. Psychology underpins this truth. Humans respond predictably to threat and reward. When uncertainty exists, they hesitate. When punishment is precise, they adapt. When authority is absent, even loyalty becomes negotiable. You cannot command respect through presence alone. You must engineer behavior. Small, deliberate acts of cruelty, social, political, or strategic shape perception, creating an invisible framework of power around you. Every observer learns quickly what is permissible and what is not, without a word wasted, without a force deployed unnecessarily. History again offers illustration. Look to Ivan the Terrible. His reign is remembered for terror, yes, but also for method. He did not wield cruelty at random. He orchestrated it to secure obedience and consolidate power. Nobles who questioned him vanished in ways that demonstrated consequence to the rest. The lesson is not to emulate his excess, but to understand the principle. The judicious use of force or fear creates dominion, particularly for those who operate without allies. Even in subtler arenas, cruelty is effective. In negotiation, the solitary individual who applies pressure with exactness bends outcomes in their favor. A pause at the right moment, a pointed withdrawal of favor, a revelation of knowledge withheld. These acts enforce control. People comply not because they admire you, but because they recognize the cost of defiance. Are you aware of the power contained in restraint, in timing, in the deliberate sting of consequence? Controlled cruelty also preserves your independence. Allies are often liabilities. They must be managed, placated, and defended. When you have no allies, your influence must carry itself. And it does, when others recognize the cost of crossing you. Your reputation precedes you. Your absence becomes a lesson, and your presence, a warning. The solitary strategist is untouchable precisely because the threat of consequence is always calculated, always credible, and always proportional. Yet, this art is not without risk. Misapplied cruelty backfires. Excess destroys loyalty. Mistimed intimidation inspires revolt. You must observe, calculate, and execute with precision. Every act communicates not just punishment, but intent. Every decision must reinforce the image of controlled, unassailable power. Do you have the patience and insight to wield such influence, or will you act impulsively, as so many alone have before, and destroy the very authority you seek to build? Ask yourself now. When you act, does every move teach obedience, or do some moves reveal hesitation? When others weigh their choices, do they fear defiance or doubt your capacity? True dominance lies in mastering the fine line between fear and respect, coercion and influence, cruelty and strategy. And there is a final, hidden layer, an evolution of controlled cruelty into permanent power, where every action, every calculation, and every display of authority ensures that your dominion is not just feared, but inevitable. That lesson waits in the next keynote, where we will uncover how mastery over consequence transforms solitude into unchallengeable supremacy. Are you ready to learn how the precise application of force can make the world bend to your will, even when no one stands with you? The next revelation will show you how dominance becomes a reflection of the mind, not the number of allies at your side. Power is rarely seized by force alone. True dominion lies in the quiet manipulation of minds, in bending others' actions without their awareness. Can they see it? No. Can they resist it? Rarely. Every subtle word, every deliberate gesture, every shadow of influence shapes them to your will. This is the art of control. The world fears the visible tyrant. It obeys the unseen master. Are you that master, or merely a player moved by forces you cannot discern? Solitude is your weapon. Observation is your strategy. Calculated action is your law. Influence without notice is dominance perfected. Do not underestimate the power of subtlety. Those who bow without realizing it are your greatest victories. Those who act unaware, guided by your hand, are your empire. Now, I ask you, how will you wield this unseen authority? Comment below your thoughts. Share the strategies you have used or observed. Subscribe to sharpen your mind with more Machiavellian tactics. and share this video to extend the reach of these truths. The world obeys those who understand its hidden currents. Will you be one of them?